Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing convenes this public hearing. Public hearing notice was given to the media on Monday, December 2nd, and on December 5th, Thursday. And for the record, today is December 10th, Tuesday, and the time now is 9 o'clock. The committee will hear and accept testimony, both oral and written, on the following bills. Bill number 216-35 COR, sponsored by myself and co-sponsored by Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes, an act to add new 5 to M of Chapter 5 in Public Law 35-36 relative to establishing the rate of stipend for Guam Police Department civilian volunteer police reservists. Also, Bill number 247-35 LS, authored by Senator James Moylan, an act to amend Section 22402 of Chapter 22, Title 5 Guam Code annotated relative to the expense that the Governor of Guam is authorized to expend in the event of a declaration of emergency for civil defense, public safety, or health care. And Bill number 227-35, sponsored by Vice Speaker Tilina Cruz Nelson, co-sponsored by myself and Senator Jose Piru Terlay, an act to add a new Section 90-116.1 of the Chapter 90, Title 9, Guam Code annotated to appropriate an additional $500,000 from the unappropriated general fund balance as of the end of fiscal year 2019 to the Department of Correction to conduct a correctional officer recruit cycle for the next 2 fiscal years. I'd like to acknowledge the following senators present. I have to my left, Senator Jim Moylan, and to my right, Senator Tello Taidagui. General, good morning. The conduct of this public hearing should be as follows. Those testifying will recognize the order of the sign-up on the sign-in sheet. Written testimony will be read. Lengthy written testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide our legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony shall be confined to the substance. Persons will be allowed to present oral testimony only once. Once you are done, you may be asked to remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony that may be desired by members of the panel. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for these proceedings. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony or may be asked to leave or be escorted, removed from the room. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on, that you speak into the microphone. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I also like to recognize Minority Leader Senator Will Castro. It's been that long. We will now begin, and we're quite surprising that we don't have anyone here to testify, but I know that for a fact that the Chief, we will now proceed on Bill 216-35 and the act to add a new 5 to M of Chapter 5 in Public Law 35-36 relative to establishing the rate of stipend for the Guam Police Department Volunteer Reserve. Ladies and gentlemen, on the bill, legislative findings and intent. Legislature Guam finds that the Guam Police has instituted a civilian volunteer police reserve program that augments the work of the men and women in blue who serve our island community daily, providing support whenever a call for help is made. And since the inception of this reserve program, volunteers provide thousands of service hours in protection of life and property by preventing crime, enforcing the laws, and maintaining order for all citizens. Let's say the legislature in Guam finds that administrative oversight occurred when language in fiscal year 2020 budgets to establish the rate of compensation was not included. Therefore, it is the intent of legislation to ensure that these civilian volunteers are confident time and effort they exerted in ensuring the safety and security of our island with a commensurate stipend for their contribution. Adding the new Section 5M of Chapter 5 in Public Law 36-35 would read, the Guam Police Department Civilian Volunteer Reserve stipends, Guam Police Department shall compensate each volunteer serving the Civilian Volunteer Reserve Program who fills the requirement for such monthly duty the amount of $500 for that month, effective October 1st, 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, this was discussed in our budget hearing, and like I stated earlier, it was administrative oversight, and this is just to add that. there being nobody from the Guam Police Department, I did speak to the chief, and he actually advised me of that oversight. And that's why this bill was introduced. They have the funding, they're willing to pay. It's just that he was surprised it wasn't included in the budget, but they are aware that that was the intent of how the funding was provided. If I have any senators, my colleagues here would like to comment on the bill, and then we can move on. We'll start with ladies first. Senator Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, thank you for this bill, Mr. Chair, but I'm very disappointed that we don't have anyone here from GPD to testify in favor of this bill. And I have to question whether it's really needed at all at this time, since they're not here today. And in the event, and the question is to you, Mr. Chair, the author of the bill, is there a written testimony at least they provided?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
You should have had it in your packet. It was from the chief.
Okay, then that being said, Mr. Chair, with that written testimony, yes, I see it. It is from the chief. And he does say that they do have them. We have 3 reservists, and therefore on the police department, we are in support of this bill and respectfully request a recommendation mentioned herein be considered. So it looks like there are some amendments that also be included based on their testimony. So I thank you for the opportunity to make a comment on this for the listening audience with regard to this, that we do have testimony. They are in support. But they also made some recommendations in their testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Will.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for the opportunity. Forgive me if I'm not clear. I'm under the weather, but I want to take advantage of this opportunity since there's no one really here in the audience, Mr. Chairman. So just some questions, points of clarification for you. First of all, I support the measure. So thank you for taking this up. My question for you, Mr. Chairman, is there already statutory language that has been changed in the Guam Code? So I'm assuming you had already changed it. We had already changed it in the Budget Act from 250 to 500.
We had it changed. We just, administrative oversight, we didn't put the number 500 per month. That was the missing.
Got you.
On the budget bill.
Okay, so that's one. Thank you. Second, and maybe this would mitigate any need for further debate on the floor, so that I can rally behind you in full support of the measure, so I'll take this opportunity again. Do we have, would you, Mr. Chairman, have an idea what the impact is of the Civilian Volunteer Police Reserve?
The impact, most of them have actually asked why their stipend hasn't gone up, and we've entertained that we will address that issue. Many of them are currently also reservists at other agencies, and they're getting paid $500, and they want to actually do more duty with the police department, but because of the stipend, it became a money issue with them.
And again, Mr. Chairman, we can probably take this up at another time since the oversight chair is here. But to clarify, my question would be, and again, I support the concept, as I support a concept of a community-based, maybe supplemental fire department force, but my question is, with this in the books, the Civilian Volunteer Police Reserve, my question is, what has been the impact of such a program? For example, and you're being a former police officer as well, Mr. Chairman, do we see more of these types of uniformed persons in the streets during, let's say, seasonal events? Do they respond more effectively after certain times so that we can provide the necessary rest for full-time police officers? And again, I'm just questioning for my benefit, and maybe the listening audience, they might already know this, with this type of supplemental police force, what has been the impact upon the community?
Well, just a reminder for all my colleagues and for the people of Guam that are listening, the civilian force, the Civilian Volunteer Police Reserves have been augmenting the Guam Police Department since the 70s. The numbers have increased. They have played major roles in our community, and they're part of the community. And that's one of the beauties, because even Senator Mueller has been trying to push for the community police, pretty much like an augment to the police department at the community level. Well, this is an augment from the community level, and they have been providing a major impact to the police department.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then again, I'd like to take it up at another time so I can learn more about that, just to kind of bring me up to speed. I know my staff has drafted legislation that I don't want to go into, but it gives greater control at the municipal level for community-based policing. Also, I hope with the same vigor, Mr. Chairman, that you and my colleagues and the Oversight Chair would embrace community policing by way of technology and these distributed forms of technology. I know I've had multiple conversations with the administration, as well as with members of my colleagues here, on the need to address community policing from an innovative perspective that makes good use of affordable technology, specifically as coordinated through the Fusion Center and the Department of Homeland Security. So with that said, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much, and I will follow up and make an appointment with your team and Senator Pito Talahi here.
Thank you. I'd like to also recognize my colleagues that have joined us, Senator Pito Terlai and Senator Therese Terlai. Senator Terlai, do you have any, Senator Pito Terlai, you have any comments for this bill? Not this time. Senator Moylan, do you have any? No. No comments? And Senator Therese Terlai, do you have any comments for the?
I guess, according to the Guam Police Department's written testimony, because they're not here right now, they've said that they are currently compensating them at $500. They said they projected for 2020.
That's correct. Only because administrative oversight, we didn't put the dollar amount 500, and that's
So
what the
they've-
chief brought up. So they've been
Okay.
paying them 250, which they've been wanting to pay them the 500.
All right, so
And
they're-
it is budgeted.
They've budgeted it, and they just wanted a technical amendment to the law.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, there being no other questions, this will conclude the hearing on Bill 216. We will now proceed to Bill 247, as introduced by Senator Jim Moylan. An act to amend 22402 of Chapter 22, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to expenses that the Governor of Guam is authorized to expend in the event of a declaration of emergency for civil defense, public safety, or health care. And it is now 9:11. Thank you. Senator Moylan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This legislation merely provides the Governor of Guam additional flexibility in increasing their authorized expenditures from $250,000 to $500,000 in the event they declare an emergency. The legislation further promotes transparency in how the expense reports are shared with the community. The genesis of this legislation was based on the recent concern by stakeholders and the community in general on situations with Department of Corrections where there were cries to declare an emergency. Based on our discussion with stakeholders, the cost, had the governor declared an emergency, may have easily exceeded $250,000 threshold. Between the activation of the National Guard, repairs on infrastructure, and the activation of SORT, we wanted to ensure that instead of seeking legislature approval for additional funds, the governor would have the flexibility by virtue of this legislation for additional transfer. The bill does not state that the governor has to spend $500,000 in cases she declares an emergency. Rather, the governor can spend up to $500,000. In the last few months, we've also seen emergencies with dengue fever outbreak, and recently with the fire at Department of Public Health. Once again, increasing the threshold would provide the governor more expenditure flexibility. We also need to keep an eye out for the infrastructure concerns of Guam Memorial Hospital. Secondly, this legislation mandates additional transparency by requiring a public release on any expenditures made via an emergency release, as well as the uploading of the report on the governor's official website. We need to make sure that any expenses that bypass procurement processes are clearly identified and easily accessible by the public. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. There being no one from the governor's office here, because I'm going to assume now that they welcome this additional funding but I'd ask my colleagues if they have any questions. I'll start with Senator Pito Terlai.
I just wanted to mention, Mr. Chair, that I support the bill, but I didn't see anything on the bill that can increase that 500,000 if the cost of the emergency declaration is over that 500,000. If anything, the writer of the bill, I would just say that it's good that we put something in there to include that if the emergency declaration requires more than 500,000, maybe we can give the governor that additional authority to increase the 500,000 based on the estimate of the emergency declaration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Will.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just leaning over to my colleague asking him if he would like to share what the intent of the bill is. I know to capture his sentiment, I just, first of all, I support the measure. I appreciate that. Without knowing the details, but I can recall the sentiment in the prior body, there was great reluctance to increase the amount afforded the chief executive in times of emergency. And so I support this measure, and I commend the freshman senator, so I support it, but I'd like to know what his motive is, and just so the listening audience could probably glean the intent and rally in support of it as well.
So the intent of 24735, it's twofold. One is, as we know, the state emergencies, when declared, there have been at least one instance based on the Consolidated Revenue and Expenditure Report of September 30, 2019, where the amount came just within a few $1,000s of exceeding the $250,000 limit. We also understand through inflation and the cost of living and all the building materials that we have on Guam, the $250,000 doesn't really go that far as it did years past. Also on the CRER report, the total expenditures for 4 declared emergencies in total was over $600,000. So a lot depends on the emergency that may be had, but we know that from some prior experience, and then also, especially in the recent fires with Department of Public Health, and in light of the situations with our public safety facilities, there's a highly possibility of exceeding the $250,000. So that basically doubling it was the idea that came across when working on this bill. In addition, what the current law doesn't show is the transparency, and this was added into the bill, that the governor would have to, within so many days, and also to place it on the website of the report, so the public knows, because we're bypassing the procurement process, and the public should be aware, and through transparency, that we can easily access that information and see where the expenses were made. So I hope that answered your question. Thank you.
Oh, that exceeded my expectation, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for the explanation.
Thank you. Senator Terlai, do you have any questions for this bill?
Well, I just, since there's no one here from the administration to answer our questions, I just wanted to put them on the record, Mr. Chair, that while I very much support the portion of this bill that would increase transparency, which requires that these transactions be reported within 5 days on the website and through an official press release. I support that portion of the bill, but raising the cap for emergency expenditures from $250,000 to $500,000, I don't support it this time, especially without a request from the executive branch. If they don't need it, waiving this cap it really sets a precedent that I think legislatures before us have tried to put in checks and balances for spending $500,000. That exceeds some agencies' budgets. We've also seen abuses in the past that I think really led to tightening of this law to where it is today. And I think that the legislature, if there really is an emergency that exceeds the ability, the $250,000 need, that we also have in law provisions that allows the legislature to go into emergency session if there is truly a declaration of emergency, and we can waive a public hearing on a bill if there is a finding of emergency. And so I think that for true emergencies, to give a spending authority without competitive bidding on $500,000, I think we should hold back on that, Mr. Chair, and just force them to account. For example, I think the dengue emergency that we have had is getting up to that amount, but it has not yet exceeded, as far as I know. But the other thing is that in the OFB report, or their examination of this bill, the Office of Finance and Budget determined that there is no limit as to the number of executive orders per emergency the governor can issue. And if that is the case, then I'm even more reluctant to increase this cap, Mr. Chair. But I do think that the transparency provisions are excellent, and we should implement those immediately. Si Dios mas.
Thank you, Senator Therese, for that statement on the OFB, and you're correct. The governor can introduce emergency declaration every week if she feels that the cost has risen. And if they need to, they can always call the legislature. Senator Tello, no comment. I have Mr. Lee from EPA. If you can come forward, come on in, come up, sir, because you wanted to testify in support of Bill 247, and he was running late. But that's Mr. Lee for you from EPA. Good morning, sir.
I'm a little surprised that we didn't see the room full of CVPs, so I was kind of counting on that to buy me a little time. But anyway, so I'll send this to your staff. I didn't get a chance to print out any copies, but Guam EPA, thank you, sir. Guam EPA fully supports Bill 24735, and I'm just going to go over the bullet points so I don't keep you guys here. Guam EPA has assigned personnel from the agency that acts as response activity coordinators in the Emergency Operations Center down at Guam Homeland Office of Civil Defense. We also play a role in the Joint Information Center when it comes to risk communication for all types of emergency situations. Being part of that process has afforded our agency to kind of see the inner workings of how an incident command center operates in terms of how they manage their finances, their logistics, their operations, and their planning. I also want to point out people like Tim Uggan, Charles Estevez, Director DeNorsi, and Deputy Lori Duenas over at Public Health, seeing firsthand how the dengue response took place, and some of the comments that we received from the CDC. By no means, it wasn't a flawless process, and I think everybody can agree with that. But the point that I'm trying to illustrate here is, in times of non-emergency, the government spends a great deal of time and resources in emergency preparedness, and I think that's evident with some of the activity that you see coming out of Homeland. Public Health, for example, has an actual a preparedness program within the department. So if we're able to see some flexibility in the in the cap of 250 to 500,000, this could be considered a part of that process as a form of preparedness. And I like the fact that there's a transparency clause there that keeps the executive branch honest about its expenditures. So, from our standpoint, being part of that process for emergency response, both man-made and natural, we support the measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Does any of my colleagues have any question of Mr. Lee from EPA? Senator Mullen?
I'm sorry, Mr. Lee, can you just reiterate again one more time? It's part of the planning preparedness, if you knew the amount of money, is that correct?
Not exactly. it's really difficult to forecast any emergency situation. I mean, if I'm going to be really absurdly honest, in the next 5 minutes we could have one, and we'd be all sitting here spinning our wheels, talking about things, and there's a disaster going on. But what I was trying to get at is there's a great deal of effort and time placed in preparing for these things, because as you all know, it's not if but when. So throughout the process of preparedness, we try to engage the public and the community on steps that they could take to be always prepared for these things. And so what I was trying to get at is, if there is an extended means for the governor to exceed 250, that would be a form of preparedness coming out of the legislature. So in theory, you would be helping us with our preparedness.
Thank you, sir. Being there's no one else to testify, the committee will conclude the public hearing on Bill 247. That's 35. The committee will continue to receive testimony for the next few days. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing, and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. San Agustin at gmail.com. This public hearing for Bill 247 is now adjourned. It is now 9:25. We will now begin to hear testimony on Bill number 227, sponsored by Vice Speaker Talina Cruz Nelson, co-sponsored by myself and Senator Jose Pito Terlay, an act to add new section 90.16.1 of the Chapter 90, Title 9, Guam Code annotated to the appropriate an additional $500,000 from the unappropriated general fund as balance as of the end of fiscal year 2019 to the Department of Corrections to conduct a correctional officer recruit cycle for the next 2 fiscal years. I have Mr. Anton from DOC. Please come forward, sir. And if you can go ahead and testify on behalf of the Department of Corrections, sir.
Good morning, Senators. Good morning. I'm here on behalf of the Director, Frank Ishizaki, the Acting Director. He's at another meeting right now and he wasn't able to attend, so I'm coming down on his behalf. Basically, we do support any... I'm sorry. My name is Anton Ogun. I'm a major at the Department of Correction, currently the Acting Warden. We do support Bill 227-35 to add additional officers to DOC. Anything this body can do to help would be greatly appreciated. Also, I'm also to report that the governor, the director, has been working with the governor, and we are in the current process of hiring several officers. We have drug tested 23 officers. 23 out of 25 have been drug tested, and so we hopefully have those guys on board soon. There's ongoing interviews today and tomorrow for 15 more CO1 positions. So we're hopeful that before the end of January we can bring on board about 30 additional officers and start the training process to get them out there to relieve some of the other officers. We also have other positions that are currently in the process with DOA for parole officers and caseworkers that are being worked on. Again, the director is working with the front office to fill these critical positions. But again, anything the legislature is willing to do to assist for future recruitment is greatly appreciated. And that was basically all I had to say on behalf of the director.
Thank you, Warden. We'll begin with, I'd like to also recognize the colleague that have joined us, Senator Kelly Marz-Taito. We will begin questioning from, I'll ask Senator Marz-Taito first. Senator Kelly, do you have any question for this bill 227?
Not at this time. And so it is good to hear the support, though. We always want to make sure that we're hearing from the various different stakeholders there. So it's important to hear that it is supported, and I will listen to the other questions or comments and see if there's anything further to add. But Siduous Maasi, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Titan. Senator Peter Terlai, the Oversight Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Major, we know for a fact that, the stumbling block in as far as hiring officers, not only in the Department of Correction, but also within the police department. The stumbling block for that is the post requirement. And you had mentioned that you should be able to hire at least 30 plus officers by January. Do you think that we will meet the certification for the post requirement by that time?
Let me just, because I just text my personnel officer just to make sure I had the numbers correct. She texted me, we were trying to get 44 officers before January. 3 of them are reemployments that are going through the process. 1 is already on board, the 2 are pending. So my understanding with the process is we're still going to fulfill all the requirements. They're going to be brought on board, drug tested, then we're going to give them the correction side of the training. And while they're doing that training, they'll go through that other requirements of the psychological background and polygraph will be going on. When they get on board, they have a 1-year probation period in which our goal is to get all that required before they meet that 1 year, before we fulfill that 1-year probationary period. So again, at this point, our plan is get them in there, give them several weeks of academy, then put them on OJT with the other line officers so they can start getting experience, and at the same time running through the other process. And then when that's all done, we'll get them done with the apprenticeship program that's going on that we're doing with GCC, where we now get them into intro corrections, intro to criminal justice, and those other classes. And that'll probably take place after their probation they've already been vetted and their probation has expired. And then they'll be full-fledged correction officers. Right now, they'll just be training officers.
So some of this requirement will be done while they're in-house?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the 30-some officers that you guys are planning to bring in have met the LE 101?
So yes, sir. Some of them already. I don't have all the resumes, all of them, but I do. There are quite a few there that have bachelor's degree already. There are some that have finished the GCC academy. They've already went through the GCC academy. So I don't have the files of all 35 of them, but I know that's a process that we've made arrangement with the post commission that all that can be done during the academy, during the training phase of their recruitment.
And that's one perfect way of getting these people on board.
Yes, sir.
Those with degrees, even up to an associate of art degrees, bachelor of art degrees. Because, when you go to the university and you take that EN 100 and you pass the EN 100, you don't have to go through the course of, the so many months that you're going to have to get the EN 100, and then at the end you have to get tested, and if you don't pass it, you have to take it over again. But that's one of the advantages that you're giving these people if they have a degree, because having a degree, they must have passed the EN 100A. Thank you very much, Major.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Will.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations on the acting appointment, Major. Your services are greatly needed there, as I understand it, in the media. I'm glad you clarified for the record, because I believe the bill addresses 30 candidates, whereas the governor, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, stated that it was her intent to hire 40 officers before the end of this calendar year. That would be December 31st. I'm reading then, based on your statement, that that's not achievable, at least between now and the end of this calendar year. Is that an accurate statement?
Well, our goal is, right now we're on track, our goal is to try to bring the 40 officers on board before January. That's our goal. Again, we just drug tested 25 of them, 23 of them. We're interviewing another 15 again today, and tomorrow. And of course, we expect a few will probably decline, and some may not show up, and we'll have to continue the process. But our goal is to really bring about 40 on board by January, and then we can start the training process, starting with their internal training academy.
And I appreciate that. I think your expedient action on the part of the department is necessary as well. Mr. Chairman, forgive my ignorance. I have about 3 more questions. First, the follow-up to that one would be, if you were to hire the 44, is that already budgeted in this fiscal year, Mr. Chairman?
I think DOC can answer that. They're getting support from the governor's office that to ensure that they're able to recruit as many as even up to 60 that was on the news. So I think maybe the major can answer that.
I'm not privy to all the budget stuff behind the scenes, but I know that the director has been meeting with the governor, and again, if the budget wasn't there, all these GG1s would not have been approved to be processed to begin with. So I'm pretty confident that the money's there somehow from the governor's office. They found a way to get the funds necessary to make this happen. Otherwise, we wouldn't be interviewing at all right now, and the drug test process wouldn't have taken place, and the reemployment would not be processing as we speak if
Major,
the funding was identified.
And I appreciate that. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you're the only one here from the department. So maybe you can get back to us. I guess my question is, and again, I'll qualify it with my ignorance, is this 44 additional officers on top of what was already approved by the current fiscal year budget, which would take you, as a matter of fact, let me finish that question and come back to it. How many officers would you need optimally to run the Department of Corrections in a perfect world?
In a perfect world, sir, to meet all the standard operating procedures as written and all the different posts and 18 housing units and all the requirements, I would need about 320 officers.
Thank you. That number is consistent with your last budget presentation back here last fall, last summer, I think around June or July.
Yeah.
How many officers do you have now?
We have, because we have about 100. This is from the warden all the way down to the lowest security guard. We have currently about 157 officers. But again, let me make sure we understand. That's not all boots on the ground, because out of that I have about 8 that are on military deployment. They come back, I think in April or May. I have some that are on medical profiles, limited terms, and things like that. So, but currently employed, about 156 officers.
So you're at 50% of the necessary manpower.
Right.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, in the interest of giving my colleagues equal time to ask questions, how would this recruitment impact your special operations unit? And I ask that, Major, because not knowing a whole lot about your operation, I remember at the beginning of the fiscal year when the budget came forward, that one of the statements from leadership was that they were making certain internal operational adjustments, if you will, in order to meet the minimum safety required for the department. And that translated to the dissolution of a special operations unit. And so my question, which I hope will be recorded in the report, is how would this impact that special operations unit? And before you answer that, could you give a brief overview of what they do and why it's important to the department, if you think it's important?
Okay.
Because I do.
Yes, I mean, any correctional facility, needs a special team to respond to, incidents that may occur, So we currently have 11 officers that are certified under the Special Operations Response Team. And again, in the beginning of this administration, due to our shortage of officers, and we lost a few more due to retirement and just transfers and stuff, we've had to disband them. We've had to disband them and put them part of the platoon. So some of them are on transport, some of them are at the other housing units, some are in Aganya. But our goal is that once we able to recruit enough officers, we will be able to stand up the Special Operations Response Team. Even if not all 11, at least 6 to 8 of them will be activated to assist the platoon commander on dealing with incidents that may happen. For example, we were using them to assist with shakedowns. Sometimes the commander and them would say, hey, the 3 of you, go up to the post 6 and check 3 or 4 cells. And that's what they would do, random. We would, inmates going to sick call or other lines, be a random pat down, pull over. Come here, 1, 2, 3, you come here, and pat them down and check them. They do perimeter check. We've had inmates that don't want to go to court or don't want to go to sick call or don't want to get out of their cell. So we say, okay, go and get them. And you know, because they have the special weapons that they need in the event the inmate doesn't want to comply. 99.9, once they see the special team, they comply. They cuff up real fast. We had an incident a few months back where the inmate inside was very belligerent and he damaged his cell. And the officers, of course, couldn't go in because he had concrete in his hand he wanted to throw at the officers. So I had the SORT team were actually on transport. So I called them in on their break and I said, okay, stand down for now. I need you to suit up and go get this guy out of the cell so that we can clean his cell and do what we need to do. They went up there and in 5 minutes they had him out of his cell without incident. We cleaned up his cell, got him to see medical, make sure he gets his medication, and then we put him back there. So we do have right now a contingency plan that in the event something does happen where I need a team, provided again the inmate is secured, the instructions is stand down and wait for me to coordinate with the special ops to come in and deal with the situation as needed. But you know, again, our goal in the future is to increase our training so that more officers will be able to respond in similar or like matters, you know, more on their own. But that's for future plans. But a special op is very vital. They're very vital to a correctional facility because we're by ourselves. There's nobody to come in and assist us in the event something does happen in the prison. You know, we're kind of on our own in there. So our goal is, again, to get them operated as soon as I get enough officers so that when I pull them offline, I don't have officers doing 20-some hours on duty. You know, and that's how we're dealing with it right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This will be my final question for today with a follow-up statement. So is it your position, representing management, acting warden, that the additional recruits would then translate to reestablishing SORT at the Department of Corrections?
Yes.
Thank you. And that's important, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
because although I don't hear or read about a lot of incidences these days about contraband being brought into the facility, there are many ways to translate that. Could it be we're doing a better job at enforcement? Could it be we're underreporting? Or could it be, in fact, that the mitigating factor to capturing or catching perpetrators and or contraband has been compromised as a result of SORT having been dissolved? I'm not saying that was the intent of any one
Right.
or group of people, but I'm saying that may have been the unintended consequence. And I appreciate management taking a position to stand up SORT or any other type of specialized unit to mitigate narcotics coming into the facility. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned that the SORT also works on perimeter checks.
Yes, you know, when we don't have enough officers to cover the perimeter 24 hours like we wish, so the SORT team will go out and do fence line inspections several times during the day. They do their checks. We usually would have them on duty from 7 in the morning to about 8 or 9 o'clock at night, securing after lockdown, you know, but sometimes they could be longer, again, doing exterior fence checks and things like that. Or even head counts. We've had them go in there and just do head counts on certain housing units and just verify inmates' presence and, you know, give the loan officer assistance in making sure all the prisons are accounted for.
Without the SORT assisting in the perimeter checks, is the perimeter checks continuously going on, or is it lessened?
No, it's still going on, sir. It's still going on. I have other officers now that go out and do it. The unit officers do it. Because of the holidays, we've actually even beefed up some of our security of the perimeter because, you know, holidays are coming up and people are trying to smuggle more contraband in. But it still gets done. It still gets done. And immediately once any kind of breach or any kind of indication there's a weakness in the security, we immediately have it fixed up right away. You know, so there's constantly, every unit does their own fence checks around their housing unit, but the exterior ones, additionally, we have other officers now that do it.
SORT was also assisting when the inmate gets belligerent and in their cell. I also read a recent report, if you can highlight, of the officers that were assaulted on duty. There were some that were hit in the face, having to go into the hospital. I'm not sure how long ago that was, but there was a report it could have been just in the paper.
Again, that did happen maybe a couple months back. We had some incidents, and the officer did receive some minor injuries. And of course, as procedure, I filled out the workman's comp documents as procedures, and had them go checked. Even some of them didn't want to go get checked; they were okay, but I still had them go get checked nonetheless, just to make sure they are okay.
Okay. Well, anticipating these 40 officers come on board, however long that may take, but at the current situation, if you give yourself a rating, right? Like when you go into the doctor's office, 1 is you're happy, 10 is you're really upset, right? With your lack of officers and your sense of emergency maybe being at Department of Corrections, without these current officers there, what would you say your pain level is?
Well, I don't sleep well at night, I'll just say that. When my phone rings in the middle of the night, but I'm sort of half right now. I'm at 5. I see my officers working really hard. We're trying our best to maintain the facility as best we can, the resources. They are tired. Again, we're on a 5 and 2. We changed the schedule from a 3 RDO, a 4 and 3 to a now 5 and 2. So there are a few that work a few more hours now. And we're just, we are cautiously optimistic and, doing our best to maintain the facility. And so far, we've been doing so well. We've been okay, managing of what we got.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Tadiwi.
Good morning, Acting Warren, again. So please excuse me if I just call you Mr. Uggan right now.
That's fine, that's
would not
fine.
add. So thank you for being here today to testify. However, I was hoping that the director would be here to testify because he would probably be able to answer a question that, he has a major connection with the governor's office, and right now we've heard that any unexpended FY19 funds, excess funds, whatever they're calling it, should not be touched. So I want to know if your director told you that you're supporting using FY19 unexpended funds.
No, I didn't get that in detail with him. He apologizes again for he had another meeting that he could not postpone. But I can bring that up to him when I see him later today. But no, I didn't get that much information from him regarding that.
Mr. Uggan, it's very important that I hear that from the director. If he supports the intent of this legislation, that's one thing. I think we all support the intent.
Right.
However, the funding issue is a concern.
Yes.
And right now, if he's in connection with the governor, they asked us not to touch any money from there. So I really want to hear it from him in writing,
Okay.
if this is the case.
Yes,
Secondly, you mentioned about the recruitment that you have. You had 100. I'm sorry. Can you just repeat those numbers because my next question is going to have to. It's going to.
Of how many officers we currently have employed?
No, that you're recruiting.
Okay, so we are currently we're making our best efforts to recruit 44 officers by the end of December. We have 3 out of that 44. 3 are reemployment. Okay, and we have already, as of Friday, we have drug tested 23 out of 25, and we are doing interviews of 15 more candidates today and tomorrow. For 15 more candidates, so for today and tomorrow.
Okay, and the number that you're looking at to try and at least get out of a declaration of a state of an emergency, because I remember the last time you had a state of emergency that was called at DOC is when you had 230 officers at DOC at the time, and then this was done many years back where a state of an emergency was called, and now you're at 160, and that's really the opportunity for the governor to call a state of emergency. Has she called in a state of emergency for DOC yet?
No, ma'am. No, Senator, no.
Wow, okay. So I don't think she thinks that's a big issue if there's no state of emergency and you're only 160. Now, once you get these individuals, these recruits, in the positions, how many, after working at DOC for maybe about a week or 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, before they decide this is not the job for me and quit, how many do you lose?
Well, I mean, the numbers vary, but I do anticipate we may lose a few after they've gone and come on board and start hitting the post, and maybe it's not for them. That's why my understanding is we're going to do a continuous recruitment. The job announcement is still open, so there's still applicants coming in. DOA is still going through the testing process. I understand they're going to be testing another batch of potential candidates for future lists. So we're going to keep the list going. That's the intent of the directors, to keep the list going. And every time we lose people due to retirement, or they just decide this is not them, then we would put down the GG1 as soon as possible and try to recruit again and just keep the process going. The reason why we got to this process right now is because generally when there's a vacancy, we don't fill that vacancy for months or years, and then it just starts compounding itself to the point where we're trying to play catch up. But I think the director's plan at this point is to, every time we have someone that retires, resigns, or leaves us for whatever reason, immediately put the paperwork down and start the recruitment process. I mean, we've run academies in the past with 4 to 5 people. Not impossible to do, but my understanding is his plan is to keep that going.
So out of 10 that are hired, how many do you lose?
Maybe 3.
So
Maybe 3
wow.
might leave.
Out of 10. So
Yeah.
okay, that's quite high considering.
Yes.
And the next question actually is retirement. How many officers do you have there who are, who are eligible for retirement?
I don't have that exact numbers, but eligible, we have, probably more than 10 or so that are eligible for retirement. But if they're deciding to retire right now, no one has really gave us that indication that they're retiring anytime soon. So, but those are numbers, Senator, I can always go back and ask the director's office to put together.
Yeah, as well as, that letter I asked for by the director to find out about this funding money, the money that's being used here in this bill,
Yeah.
as well as how many officers are on military deployment, long-term medical leave. If you can also incorporate that too as well, that'd be helpful. It was mentioned earlier about the fence, and I know that the last director actually pulled off some individuals from the perimeter fencing watching area, and I've got word that there's a lot of ice on this island right now, quite a bit, and it's become very, very bad at this point, and that contraband in DOC is actually rising because they're lacking the enforcement on the fence area, because people just drive by and throw contraband over the fence, and that's how it's mostly coming in. And I'm hearing that you guys are changing that. You're starting to reinforce the perimeter fence watch now. Is that true?
Yes,
Oh,
Senator.
that's good to hear, because I'm hearing a lot of comments from people who deal with DOC.
Yes. There's a cost to it because the overtime is going to go up for some of them, but especially now the holidays. But yes, I have a little bit more officers on perimeter, all the way into the evening hours, sometimes until midnight, or even longer. Just depends.
Okay, and okay. So that's basically all my questions. I'm looking forward to getting that letter from the director, if you don't mind, Ms. Duggan, and Merry Christmas to you, my friend. Thank
Merry
you for what
Christmas.
you're doing. I know it's a lot of work over at DOC, and I see that you're trying, especially being here at all these public hearings. I appreciate that.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Therese.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Major Uggan and
Morning.
Acting Warden. So, of course, I support the intent of this bill. I just had some questions for primarily BBMR, who is not here today. There is no fiscal note that I've seen from BBMR as to these lapses. So the bill says it's going to use unappropriated general fund lapses from 2019. And there's also no note from OFB in this file, but the title says that this 500,000 from lapses is going to be used to recruit for the next 2 fiscal years. But if you read the bill carefully, it really only uses 500,000 for the recruitment of officers during fiscal year 2020. And for 2021, it says that the Director of Corrections shall transmit in his proposed budget for fiscal year 2021 costs to do additional recruitment for 15 people. So it looks like it will do 15 people for 2019 for $500,000. And so I would have liked to verify that amount with BBMR, but BBMR, when they were here last during the SES meeting, told us that according to their CRER, Consolidated Revenue and Expenditure Report, there was $15 million in lapses for 2019. And they gave us reasons that that's just a soft number and pending, more clarification. But they also told us that they needed $5 million of that lapses to use for retirees' health insurance. So that reduced it by $10 million. I know that there was if I remember correctly, the source that our bill pending to pay war claims is $7 million. That was also from lapsed 2019 money. And so I really want to clarify just the numbers here from BBMR. Otherwise, I want to congratulate DOC on the efforts to recruit and getting the 44 new officers by January it's great. And I agree with your director's decision to do continuous lists to fill in any vacancies that occur during 20. It looks like you're funded enough for 2020 and also for the 44 new officers for 2020. And so filling any vacancies I hope that you can get that done quick. I hope that if this bill passes and the $500,000 is appropriated from lapses for 2020, that you can also do a quick recruitment. I know that it's been taking quite some time, not just your agency, but across the board, a lot of the public safety agencies, even though we may have put money there, it just takes a while for this recruitment process. So I know that there seems to be efforts to how to fill these positions faster. One of them is to put them on the job training before they've completed what used to be pre-requirements, which is the polygraph and the background check. But I do hope that those are done as early as possible and they don't push them down too far, because I don't want you to have to, go through replacement. The earlier you know that, the better, I'm sure. And I'm sure for the safety of all the other officers, you want to know that as soon as possible. And the other provision of this bill, Mr. Chair, that will require that the 2020 budget right now for DOC will not lapse, and it shall continue through the next year. So I think that's also good too. So you can plan your recruitment, like this one's coming down to December, but thank you. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Reese. I'd just like to advise my colleagues that if you've been watching the news, the governor had offered to hire up to 40 for DOC and even up to 60. And that being said, and I understand that what the bill was for was to hire specifically 15 candidates for 500,000. That being that the governor is supporting DOC and getting folks hired, I'm actually looking forward to seeing these special ops up and running, and the folks there reducing the hours from 20 hours or almost 24 to down to maybe what I'm used to when I was in the police department in the 70s with Senator Chalaya. We were doing 16 hours, but 8 is always comfortable, but that's something you got to work with. And being that your ideal number total is 320, if you folks can get to 250, 260, and I understand where Senator Tideway mentioned that it should have been a emergency, but I think that's the way they're responding. Instead of declaring emergency, give you the green light to hire. Fill all your vacancies, whatever is identified in your organizational chart, fill it, hire folks. And And, you know, how you're processing it is called the fast track. That's what DOC is doing, and that's great that you're doing a fast track, and then you weed them out as you go along before the year's up. And I actually look forward to, some of the folks may not. The rate you said that among 10 employees, you may lose 3. Hopefully you don't lose more than 1. Because the more officers on the ground, the safer they all feel.
Yes.
The less they'll feel the burden of having to, I gotta cover somebody. No, you need to cover each other, not somebody. Everybody has to cover each other. You know, DOC is similar to the Department of Public Safety when we were there with Senator Terlai, where when you see a fellow officer next to you, you're more comfortable, you're safe. And when you get the special ops there, I know that everything will just start to calm down. And then you guys can actually have a great Christmas. Hopefully everything works out. Any of my colleagues have anything else they wanted to mention? If not, we'll
I got
Senator
one
Terlai.
thing, Joe. Major, remember the last time that we were here regarding the recruitment of for reservists? I'm glad to say that, and I want to thank my colleague Joseph and Agustin for making that a reality as far as funding for those recruits. Remember, I mentioned that if there's no money there, nobody's going to go up to DOC and volunteer their services. But I think Joseph and Agustin did something about that, and he did. I think he did budget for the reservists employment up at DOC. I just want to mention that.
Also, I just got a short text from OFB. It's 50 funded vacancies you have. So you can go up to 50, even 60. So the budget has it. You're good to go. It's just getting the GG1s in, exactly what you've been fighting for years. I know that,
Yes.
Major Algon. You've been actually asking, when can we get more people? When can we get? Now the opportunity's there. Let's get them all hired, as many people. Senator Castro, you have another follow-up on that one?
Just a statement, Mr. Chairman, since you brought that up. I did inquire with you on the side because I made a statement. I wouldn't ask any more questions, but I want to state my point of information down the line that I'm not even sure the body can appropriate sine die past the life of this legislative body. I know that the bill calls for an appropriation that goes into next fiscal year.
Thank you. There being no one else to testify,
Can I just say one last
Yes,
thing?
sir.
I just want to thank all of you for helping us. I know the men and women that work up there greatly appreciate it, and their families. We greatly appreciate it. Any work anybody can do to help us get what we need so that our mission is fulfilled and that everyone goes home safe at the end of the shift, and, you know, that is greatly appreciated. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden Uggan. I hope our next goal after all the hiring happens is the building of a new facility. That, I think, would be the one of the biggest goal, and that will help everybody. There being no one else to testify, the committee will conclude the public hearing for Bill 227-35LS. The committee will continue to receive testimony for the next few days. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Appropriation and Housing, and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. @gmail.com. Jesus Marcy for your attendance and participation in today's hearing, and for those at home, thank you for watching. This public hearing for Bill 227-35 is now adjourned. It's now 10:03. Ladies and gentlemen, having a great day. Thank you.